Rain hammered against the ballroom windows as Catherine Ashford pressed her trembling fingers against the cold glass. Behind her the celebration raged on, laughter and music filling the grand hall where her sister danced with the man Catherine had waited 7 years to see again. 7 years since she had made the choice that destroyed everything. 7 years since Lord Adrian Blackwood left England without a word, leaving her alone with the consequences of her betrayal. And now he was back. More handsome than memory allowed, more powerful than she had imagined possible, standing in her family home with his new fiancée on his arm. Catherine's reflection stared back at her from the window, a ghost of the girl she once was. She touched the thin gold chain hidden beneath her gown, the locket she had never removed, the one that held his portrait and the weight of her unforgivable sin. Tonight he would learn the truth. Tonight everything would shatter once more, and Catherine, who had spent 7 years preparing for this moment, suddenly wondered if she had the courage to face him after all. The Ashford estate in Hampshire had always been beautiful in spring. But to Catherine, the gardens where she now walked alone held only memories she desperately wished to forget. 28 years old and still unwed, she had become the subject of whispered speculation among society. The eldest Ashford daughter who had mysteriously refused every suitor who came calling. The woman who seemed determined to remain a spinster despite her considerable beauty and generous dowry. They did not know. They could never know that her heart had been given away 7 years ago to a man who had every reason to hate her, to a man she had betrayed in the cruelest way imaginable. "Catherine, you'll catch cold out here." The voice belonged to her younger sister Isabel, now 22 and radiant with youth and promise. She hurried down the garden path, a shawl in her hands. "Mother is asking for you. There are guests arriving for tonight's ball." Catherine accepted the shawl with a grateful smile that did not reach her eyes. "I needed a moment away from the preparations. You've been taking many moments away lately." Isabel studied her sister with concern. "Are you unwell? Should we postpone the ball?" "No." Catherine's voice was firm. This evening must proceed as planned, though the words felt like stones in her throat. Because tonight was not just any ball. Tonight was the celebration of Isabel's engagement to Lord Thomas Hartley, a good man from a respected family, and Thomas had written to say he was bringing a particular friend who had recently returned to England after years abroad, Lord Adrian Blackwood. The name alone made Catherine's hands tremble. Isabel squeezed her sister's arm affectionately. "I know you think I'm too young to marry, but Thomas makes me happy. Catherine, I want you to be happy for me. I am happy for you." And that at least was truth. Isabel deserved every joy. She was innocent, pure, untouched by the mistakes that haunted Catherine's every waking moment. As Isabel chatted about the evening's arrangements, Catherine's mind drifted back to when she was 21 and Adrian Blackwood had been the second son of an earl, with no title to inherit and only a modest income from his military commission. She had loved him desperately, completely, with all the passionate certainty of youth. They had met at her cousin's wedding. He had asked her to dance and Catherine had felt the world shift beneath her feet. For 6 glorious months they had courted with her father's grudging permission. Adrian had been everything. Intelligent, kind, honorable. He had treated her like something precious. He had spoken of the future they would build together, a modest future perhaps, without grand estates or titles, but one filled with love and partnership. Then her father's investments had failed. Overnight the Ashford fortune had crumbled. Her father had called her to his study one autumn morning, his face grave with worry. "Catherine, I must speak plainly. Our financial situation is dire. Without intervention, we will lose everything. The estate, your sister's dowries, our standing in society." She had sat frozen, unable to comprehend how completely their world had changed. "There is a solution." Her father had continued. "Lord Pemberton has made an offer for your hand. He is wealthy beyond measure and willing to settle all our debts in exchange for marriage to you, Lord Pemberton, a man 40 years her senior, a widower known for his cold disposition and excessive pride, a man Catherine did not love and could never love. But father, I'm promised to Adrian we have an understanding. Her father's expression had hardened. Blackwood has nothing to offer you. No title, no fortune. He cannot save this family. Only Pemberton can do that. You have 3 days to decide, Catherine, your happiness or your family's survival. Those 3 days had been the darkest of Catherine's life. She had tried to find another way, any other way, but the numbers did not lie. Without Pemberton's intervention, her younger sisters would have no dowries, no futures. Her mother would be cast out of society. Her father faced debtor's prison, and Adrian, beloved Adrian, could do nothing to help. His military salary was barely enough to support himself. He had no wealthy relations, no prospects beyond his commission. He could offer her love, but not salvation. So Catherine had made her choice. She had written to Adrian, ending their courtship with lies that burned her throat, even as she penned them. She told him she had realized their attachment was merely youthful fancy, that she desired a more appropriate match, a man of greater means and standing. She wrote coldly, clinically, destroying with each word the beautiful thing they had built together. She never told him about her father's debts, never explained that she was sacrificing her own happiness to save her family. She let him believe the worst of her, that she was shallow, mercenary, interested only in wealth and status. Because if he knew the truth, he would try to stop her. He would insist they could manage somehow, and Catherine could not watch her family suffer when she had the power to save them. 2 weeks later she had married Lord Pemberton in a quiet ceremony that felt like a funeral. Adrian had already left England, purchasing a commission in India to escape the memories of her betrayal. She never saw him again. For 7 years Catherine had lived as Lady Pemberton, enduring a loveless marriage to a man who treated her with distant courtesy and nothing more. She had fulfilled her duty, managing his household, attending society functions, playing the role of the perfect wife. But she had never stopped loving Adrian, never stopped regretting the sacrifice she had made. Then, 18 months ago, Lord Pemberton had died suddenly of a heart ailment. Catherine had mourned him respectfully, though truthfully she felt only relief. Relief that her prison sentence had ended, relief that she was free. But freedom brought its own anguish. Because Catherine was still young enough to remarry, still beautiful enough to attract suitors, and yet she could not imagine binding herself to another man. Not when her heart remained stubbornly, painfully attached to someone who must hate her. She refused every offer of courtship with polite but firm declines. She threw herself into managing the Ashford estate, which her father had signed over to her as thanks for her sacrifice. She supported her sisters, encouraged Isabel's romance with Lord Thomas, and tried to accept that she would live out her days alone. She had made her choice 7 years ago, and now she would live with the consequences. But she had not expected Adrian to return, had not expected to see him again in this lifetime. Catherine, Isabel's voice pulled her back to the present. "Did you hear me? I said Thomas's friend, Lord Blackwood, will be arriving this evening. Do you remember him? He used to call on you years ago, before you married Lord Pemberton." Catherine forced her expression into neutrality. "I remember him. Well, he's become quite successful in India, made a fortune in trade and earned a knighthood for his service." Isabel's eyes sparkled with gossip, "And he's recently become engaged to a Miss Eleanor Sinclair, daughter of a shipping merchant. Thomas says they make a striking couple." Each word landed like a physical blow. Adrian was engaged. Of course he was engaged. He had moved on with his life, built a fortune, found happiness with someone else. Why should he not? Catherine had destroyed his trust, broken his heart. He owed her nothing. She deserved nothing. I'm pleased for him, Catherine managed to say. Then we should return to the house. There is still much to prepare. The ball that evening was a glittering affair. The Ashford ballroom had been decorated with hundreds of candles and arrangements of white roses. Guests filled the space with their laughter and fine clothes, celebrating the engagement of Isabel and Lord Thomas. Catherine moved through the crowd with practiced grace, greeting guests, ensuring everything proceeded smoothly. But her attention remained fixed on the entrance, waiting with dread and desperate hope for the moment when Adrian would arrive. When he finally appeared in the doorway, Catherine felt the air leave her lungs. 7 years had changed him. Gone was the young military officer with gentle eyes and modest bearing. In his place stood a man of substance and power. Adrian had grown broader through the shoulders, his face more angular, marked by experience and time. He wore his evening clothes with the easy confidence of someone accustomed to respect. But his eyes, those dark eyes that had once looked at her with such tenderness, now held something cold and distant. On his arm was Miss Eleanor Sinclair, a beautiful woman with auburn hair and a confident smile. They made indeed a striking couple, moving through the crowd with easy elegance. Catherine watched from across the room as Thomas greeted them warmly, as Isabel was introduced with delighted enthusiasm. Then Adrian's gaze swept the ballroom and landed on Catherine. For one terrible, endless moment, their eyes met. Catherine saw recognition flash across his features, followed by something else. Shock, perhaps, or anger, or nothing at all, just polite indifference. She could not tell. He inclined his head in the barest acknowledgement, then turned his attention back to Eleanor. It was as if 7 years had erased everything that had once existed between them. Catherine's hand trembled so badly she had to set down her wine glass before she dropped it. "Pull yourself together," she told herself fiercely. "This is Isabel's night. You will not ruin it with your own ghosts." Thomas was leading his party toward her now, Isabel on one arm, Adrian and Eleanor following behind. Catherine forced herself to stand tall, to school her features into pleasant welcome. "Lady Pemberton," Thomas bowed. "May I present Lord Adrian Blackwood and his fiancée, Miss Eleanor Sinclair. Lord Blackwood and I are old acquaintances from his time in Hampshire." Catherine extended her hand, proud that it did not shake. "Lord Blackwood, how wonderful to see you return to England. Congratulations on your engagement." Adrian took her hand with formal courtesy, his touch impersonal, nothing like the way he used to hold her as if she were precious and fragile. "Lady Pemberton." His voice was deeper than she remembered, carefully neutral. "Thank you for your kind words." Miss Sinclair smiled warmly at Catherine. "Lord Blackwood has told me so much about Hampshire. I'm delighted to finally visit. I hope you will enjoy your stay." Catherine replied, though each word cost her, "The Ashford estate is beautiful this time of year." The conversation continued with excruciating politeness. Plans for the wedding, discussions of India, questions about the estate, all perfectly appropriate, perfectly distant. Adrian never looked directly at Catherine again. It was as if she had become invisible to him, or perhaps more accurately, as if she had become nothing more than another society acquaintance, someone to whom he owed basic courtesy and nothing more. When the party finally moved on to greet other guests, Catherine excused herself and fled to the terrace. The cool night air bit at her exposed skin, but she welcomed the discomfort. It matched the pain twisting in her chest. "He hates you. What did you expect? You destroyed him, and now he's moved on. This is what you wanted. This is what you deserve." But knowing she deserved his indifference did not make it hurt less. Catherine remained on the terrace longer than propriety allowed, composing herself before she could return to the festivities. When she finally re-entered the ballroom, she saw Adrian dancing with Eleanor. They moved together beautifully, a matched pair that drew admiring glances from other guests. Eleanor laughed at something Adrian said, her hand resting comfortably on his shoulder. They looked happy. They looked right together. Catherine turned away before the tears could fall. For the rest of the evening she avoided Adrian as much as possible, staying on the opposite side of the ballroom, engaging other guests in conversation, keeping herself busy with hostess duties. But she remained painfully aware of his presence, of the sound of his laugh, of the way he looked at Eleanor with warm attention, of everything Catherine had given up and could never reclaim. The night was drawing to a close when disaster struck. Catherine was standing near the refreshment table when she heard raised voices near the entrance. She turned to see her father in heated discussion with a man she did not recognize, a man whose expensive clothes and cold expression marked him as someone of importance and potential trouble. Lord Ashford, the stranger was saying loudly enough to draw attention. "I've come a long way to discuss the matter of your outstanding debts. Surely we can settle this like gentlemen." Catherine's blood turned to ice. Debts. Her father had promised that Lord Pemberton's settlement had resolved everything. What debts could possibly remain? Her father's face had gone pale. "This is neither the time nor place for such discussion. We can meet tomorrow to review the accounts." "I think not." The stranger's smile was unpleasant. "I've given you ample time to repay what you owe. 3 months of correspondence ignored. Tonight I demand satisfaction. Either you repay the £15,000 immediately, or I will take legal action that will see you in debtor's prison by week's end." £15,000. The sum was staggering. Catherine felt the ballroom spinning around her. How could her father possibly owe such an amount? And how had she not known? Around them the music had stopped. Guests were turning to watch this scandalous scene unfold. Catherine saw Isabel's horrified expression, saw Thomas's confusion, and worst of all, she saw Adrian watching with careful attention, his expression unreadable. Catherine moved forward on instinct. "Sir, I am Lady Pemberton, Lord Ashford's eldest daughter. Perhaps this matter could be discussed more privately." The stranger turned his cold gaze on her. "I have no interest in privacy, my lady. Your father is a cheat and a liar, and it's time society knew the truth of his character. My father is neither of those things." Catherine's voice rang with authority. She did not feel, "Whatever debts exist, I'm certain they can be resolved without such accusations." "Then you can resolve them." The stranger pulled out a document. "Here is the promissory note your father signed 3 years ago. £15,000, due upon demand. I am now demanding payment." Catherine took the document with shaking hands. She recognized her father's signature, recognized the date, 3 years ago, when Lord Pemberton was still alive. Her father must have taken on new debts after her marriage, gambling perhaps, or failed investments, and now those debts had come due at the worst possible moment. "I will repay what is owed." Catherine heard herself say, "Give me 1 month to arrange my affairs, and you will have your payment in full." The stranger laughed harshly. "You, a woman? What means do you have?" "I am widow to Lord Pemberton." Catherine lifted her chin. "His estate was left to me without entail. I have sufficient assets to meet this obligation." The stranger studied her skeptically. "Then tomorrow you will present me with proof of these assets and a signed agreement guaranteeing payment within 30 days. If you fail to do so, I will proceed with legal action against your father." He bowed mockingly. "Good evening, Lady Pemberton. I look forward to our meeting." He turned and left, leaving Catherine standing in the center of the ballroom, the promissory note clutched in her hand, aware of every eye upon her. The silence that followed was suffocating. Then, blessedly, the orchestra began to play again. Conversation resumed, though Catherine knew tongues would wag for weeks about this scandal. Her father approached, his face ashen. "Catherine, I can explain." "Not now." Catherine's voice was tight with barely controlled fury. "We will discuss this tomorrow. Tonight is Isabel's celebration. I won't have it ruined further." She turned to find Thomas and Isabel watching her with concern. "I apologize for that unfortunate scene," she said calmly, though her heart was pounding. "Please continue to enjoy your evening." But the damage was done. Guests began making early departures, citing various excuses. Within an hour the ballroom had emptied, leaving only family and a handful of close friends. Catherine stood alone again on the terrace, trying to process what had just happened. £15,000. She did have assets from Lord Pemberton's estate, but not that much liquid capital. She would need to sell property, call in investments, potentially mortgage the Ashford estate itself, and she would need to do it all within 30 days or watch her father be taken to debtor's prison. "I wondered if you were still the self-sacrificing type." The voice came from the shadows near the terrace doors. Catherine spun around to find Adrian standing there, his expression unreadable in the dim light. She had not heard him approach. "Lord Blackwood." She tried to keep her voice steady. "I thought you had departed with the other guests." Adrian stepped into the moonlight. His evening coat discarded, his cravat loosened slightly. "I stayed behind. I wanted to speak with you privately." Catherine's heart hammered in her chest. "I cannot imagine what we have to discuss." "Can you not?" Adrian moved closer. "Then allow me to enlighten you. 7 years ago you ended our courtship with a letter that painted you as shallow and mercenary. You married Lord Pemberton within weeks, apparently confirming everything you had written." The pain in his voice was carefully controlled but unmistakable. "I spent years trying to understand how I could have been so wrong about you, how the woman I loved could have cared so little." Catherine wanted to explain, to tell him everything, but the words caught in her throat. "I'm sorry," was all she could manage. "I'm sorry I hurt you." "Sorry?" Adrian's laugh was bitter. "Is that truly all you have to say?" She forced herself to meet his eyes. "What would you have me say?" "Adrian, that I regret the choices I made?" "I do. Every day. That I never stopped thinking of you?" "I didn't. But none of that changes the past. What's done is done." "Then why?" He demanded. "Why marry him if you knew you would regret it? Why throw away what we had?" "Because I had no choice." The words burst from her before she could stop them. "Because my father's debts would have destroyed my entire family. Because Lord Pemberton offered salvation in exchange for my hand. Because I chose their survival over my own happiness." Adrian stared at her. "The promissory note from tonight, that's why you're paying it. To protect your father again." "Yes." Catherine's voice broke. "I cannot seem to stop making the same sacrifice, even when it costs me everything. But 7 years ago," Adrian insisted, "if you had told me the truth, we could have found another way." "What other way?" Catherine's composure shattered. "You had nothing, Adrian. No fortune, no prospects. My father's debts were crushing. Lord Pemberton was the only option. So you lied to me, made me believe you never cared, rather than trust me with the truth." "I lied to save you," she cried. "If you had known, you would have tried to help. You would have sacrificed yourself for a problem you could not solve. I couldn't let you do that. So instead, you sacrificed yourself." Adrian's voice was raw, "and left me to spend 7 years believing I had meant nothing to you. I thought it would be easier for you that way." Catherine whispered, "Better to think me shallow than to know the truth and feel helpless." Adrian was silent for a long moment. When he finally spoke, His voice was quiet. You were wrong, Catherine. You should have trusted me. You should have given me the choice. I know. Tears streamed down her face now. I know I was wrong. I've known it every day for 7 years, but I cannot change what I did. I can only live with the consequences. And what about now? Adrian asked. Will you sacrifice yourself again for your father's mistakes? What choice do I have? She asked helplessly. Adrian studied her for another long moment. Then he did something Catherine never expected. He reached into his coat and pulled out a bank draft. £15,000. He held it out to her. To cover your father's debt. Catherine stared at the paper as if it were a snake. I cannot accept that. You can, and you will. Adrian's tone left no room for argument. Consider it a loan, if it makes you feel better. You can repay me over time. Why? Catherine's voice shook. Why would you help me after what I did to you? Because despite everything, Adrian said softly, I never stopped caring for you, because I spent 7 years angry, only to discover tonight that my anger was based on a misunderstanding, and because I cannot stand by and watch you destroy yourself again when I have the means to prevent it. Catherine's hands trembled as she accepted the bank draft. This is too much. You owe me nothing. I owe you the truth I didn't have 7 years ago. Adrian replied, and perhaps a chance for both of us to make different choices. But you're engaged, Catherine whispered. To Miss Sinclair. Adrian's expression softened. Eleanor and I have an understanding, not a love match. Her father wished her to marry someone of standing. I needed a suitable wife for society's sake. We are friends, nothing more. The engagement can be ended quietly if circumstances change. Catherine's heart stuttered. What are you saying? I'm saying, Adrian stepped closer, that 7 years ago we lost something precious because of circumstances beyond our control, because of your nobility and my powerlessness. But we are not those people anymore. You are widowed and independent. I have fortune and position. The obstacles that separated us no longer exist. She looked up at him, afraid to hope. Adrian, I destroyed your trust. I lied to you in the cruelest way. How could you possibly forgive that? I'm not certain I can, he admitted. Not fully. Not yet. But perhaps we could try. Perhaps we could start again, without the lies and sacrifices. Just two people learning to trust each other once more. Catherine's tears fell freely now. You should hate me, she whispered. After everything, you should hate me, but I don't. Adrian reached out and gently wiped away her tears. I thought I did. For years I was certain I hated you, but seeing you tonight, learning the truth, all I feel is regret for the time we've lost, and hope that perhaps we haven't lost everything. Catherine could barely breathe. What about Miss Sinclair? I will speak with Eleanor tomorrow. She will understand. Adrian's hand moved to cup Catherine's cheek. She knows I do not love her. We entered this engagement with clear eyes. She will not be heartbroken. Then, before Catherine could fully process what was happening, Adrian leaned down and pressed his lips to hers. It was a gentle kiss, tentative, as if he were asking permission. Catherine responded without thought, her hands coming up to rest on his chest, feeling his heartbeat beneath her palms. All the years of grief and longing poured into that kiss. All the words they had not said, all the time they had lost. When they finally pulled apart, both were trembling. I still waited for you, Catherine whispered against his lips, even when I had no right to, even when I thought I would never see you again. I waited, then wait no longer. Adrian pulled her close. We've wasted 7 years. I don't intend to waste another moment. They stood together on the terrace, holding each other as the night grew deep around them. Inside the manor, the candles were being extinguished. The ball was over. But for Catherine and Adrian, something new was beginning, something they had thought lost forever. A second chance. The morning after the ball brought chaos to the Ashford household. Catherine woke early after a sleepless night spent replaying every moment of her conversation with Adrian. The bank draft lay on her dressing table, a tangible reminder that last night had not been a dream. But with morning light came cold reality and difficult decisions. She found her father in his study, looking haggard and aged, beyond his years. "Catherine." He stood as she entered. "I owe you an explanation. You owe me honesty." Catherine closed the door behind her. "How did you accumulate £15,000 in debt after I married Lord Pemberton specifically to save you from ruin?" Her father sank back into his chair. "Gambling at first. Small amounts, nothing significant. But then I made poor investments based on bad advice. The debts compounded. I kept thinking I could recover the losses if I just had a bit more time. So you took on more debt." Catherine's voice was flat, from a man who clearly has no qualms about public humiliation. "Your mother doesn't know," her father said desperately. "If society learns the extent of our financial troubles, your sisters will be ruined. Isabel's engagement to Lord Thomas will surely be called off." Catherine felt the familiar weight of responsibility settle on her shoulders. "I have the means to pay this debt. Lord Pemberton left me well provided for, and I have accepted assistance from an outside source." Her father looked up with desperate hope. "Assistance? Lord Blackwood has provided a loan." Catherine chose her words carefully. £15,000 to be repaid over time. "But father, this is the last time. Do you understand? I will not sacrifice myself again for debts you incurred through poor judgment." Her father's face crumpled. "You're right, I've been a fool and a coward, letting my daughter save me while I continued to gamble away our future. I don't deserve your help." "No," Catherine agreed. "You don't. But Isabel and mother deserve better than scandal and ruin. So I will do this one final time. But there will be conditions." "Name them." "The gambling stops immediately. You will sign over complete financial control of the Ashford estate to me. Every penny that comes in or goes out will be under my management, and you will tell mother the truth. All of it. She deserves to know." Her father nodded miserably. "I agree to all of it." "Catherine, I am truly sorry." She studied him for a moment, this man who had shaped so much of her fate. "I know you are. But sorry doesn't erase the past. It only opens the possibility of a different future." Later that morning, Catherine received a calling card from Miss Eleanor Sinclair. The lady wished to speak with her privately. Catherine's stomach knotted with anxiety as she received Eleanor in the morning room. She had expected anger, perhaps accusation. Instead, Eleanor greeted her with a gentle smile. "Lady Pemberton, thank you for seeing me on such short notice." "Miss Sinclair," Catherine gestured to a seat. "May I offer you tea?" Eleanor settled gracefully into a chair. "Tea would be lovely. Thank you." As Catherine poured, Eleanor studied her with intelligent eyes. "Lord Blackwood spoke with me this morning." Catherine's hand trembled slightly, but she managed to set the teapot down without incident. "I see. He explained that you and he share a history, that circumstances separated you years ago, but those circumstances no longer apply." Eleanor accepted her teacup. "He was quite honest about his feelings for you. He wished to end our engagement with integrity rather than deception." Catherine felt tears prick at her eyes. "Miss Sinclair, I never intended to come between you. I had no idea Adrian would even be in attendance last night, much less that he would." Eleanor held up a hand gently. "Please, there's no need to apologize. Lord Blackwood and I entered our engagement with clear understanding. We were to be partners of convenience, not a love match. She smiled softly. My heart belongs to someone else entirely, someone my father would never approve of. Catherine's surprise must have shown on her face, because Eleanor continued, a musician, talented, passionate, completely unsuitable in my father's eyes. I agreed to marry Lord Blackwood to end my father's pressure to choose someone of appropriate station. Adrian agreed because he needed a wife for society's sake, but neither of us were in love. Catherine set down her teacup carefully. Then you're not heartbroken by this development? On the contrary, Eleanor's eyes sparkled. I'm relieved. Adrian has given me the freedom to make my own choice now, and he's given you both a second chance at happiness. You're a remarkable woman, Catherine said with genuine admiration. Eleanor stood, preparing to leave. As are you, Lady Pemberton. It takes great courage to sacrifice your own happiness for others, but perhaps now you can choose your own path. After Eleanor departed, Catherine sat alone in the morning room, trying to process how quickly her life had transformed. 24 hours ago she had been resigned to lonely spinsterhood. Now possibility stretched before her like an unexpected gift. But possibility brought its own fears. 7 years was a long time. She and Adrian were not the same people they had been. Could they truly rebuild what had been destroyed? Could she trust herself not to push him away again if circumstances demanded another sacrifice? Catherine, her mother's voice interrupted her thoughts. Lady Ashford entered the room, her expression troubled. Your father has just told me everything. The debts, your sacrifice, Lord Pemberton. She crossed to Catherine and took her hands. My darling girl, why did you never tell me? Because you couldn't have changed anything. Catherine said gently, and I didn't want you to carry the burden of knowing what I had given up. Her mother's eyes filled with tears. All this time I thought you had married for status and security. I never imagined that I did it to save our family. Catherine finished. Yes, Mother, that's exactly what I did. Lady Ashford pulled Catherine into her arms. I am so sorry, sorry that we put you in such a position, sorry that you bore this alone. Can you forgive us? There's nothing to forgive. Catherine held her mother close. I made my choice freely. I would make it again to protect you all. But her mother pulled back to look at her seriously. What about now? Your father says Lord Blackwood has provided assistance. Is there something between you? There was, Catherine admitted. 7 years ago, before I married Lord Pemberton, I loved him desperately, and he loved me. But I ended things to marry Lord Pemberton without telling him why. Her mother's hand flew to her mouth. Oh, Catherine. Last night he learned the truth. Catherine continued. And she paused, searching for words. He says he wants to try again, to rebuild what we lost. Her mother studied her carefully. And what do you want? I want to believe it's possible. Catherine whispered. But I'm afraid, Mother, afraid that too much time has passed. Afraid that the trust we once had can't be rebuilt. Afraid that I'll fail him again if circumstances demand it. Love always requires courage. Her mother said softly, and trust must be built one day at a time. But Catherine, if Lord Blackwood is offering you a second chance, don't let fear steal that gift. You've spent 7 years living with the consequences of one sacrifice. Don't sacrifice your future happiness as well. Catherine nodded, her mother's words settling into her heart like a benediction. Over the following weeks, Adrian called on Catherine regularly. They walked in the gardens, rode through the countryside, and spent hours in conversation relearning each other. It was not always easy. Sometimes silence fell between them, heavy with unspoken memories. Sometimes Catherine caught Adrian watching her with an expression she could not read, wondering perhaps if she might disappear again. if this fragile new thing between them might shatter as their first love had. One afternoon, as they sat by the lake on the Ashford property, Adrian asked the question Catherine had been dreading. "Tell me about your marriage to Pemberton." She tensed. "Must we discuss that? I need to understand." Adrian said gently, "You gave up 7 years of your life for your family. What was the cost?" Catherine stared at the water, watching sunlight dance across its surface. Lord Pemberton was not a cruel man. He was cold, distant, but never deliberately unkind. We maintained separate bedchambers. He had his interests and I had mine. We were civil to each other, nothing more. You lived as strangers under the same roof. Yes. Her voice was barely a whisper. For 7 years I played the role of the dutiful wife while my heart remained elsewhere. Adrian's hand found hers, squeezing gently. "You should have told me the truth, given me the chance to fight for us. I know that now." Catherine turned to look at him. "But Adrian, I was young and frightened. My father painted such a desperate picture. I thought I was doing the noble thing, the necessary thing. You were doing what you thought was right." Adrian acknowledged. "I cannot fault you for that, but I can regret that we lost so much time." Catherine leaned her head against his shoulder, feeling his arm come around her. "Can we truly reclaim what we had? Or are we chasing a memory that no longer exists?" Adrian was quiet for a moment.
"I think we're creating something new. Not the innocent young love we once shared, but something deeper, built on understanding, on knowing what we risked losing." The answer satisfied something in Catherine's heart. Yes, she agreed. Something new, but some old wounds proved harder to heal. A month after the ball, Catherine and Adrian were walking through the village when they encountered Lord James Blackwood. Adrian's older brother and current Earl of Westmere, James. Adrian greeted him with surprise. "I didn't know you were in Hampshire. I wasn't planning to be." James's expression was cold as he glanced at Catherine. "But I heard some interesting rumors about my brother rekindling an old attachment." He turned his attention back to Adrian. "Might we speak privately?"
Adrian's jaw tightened. "Anything you wish to say can be said in front of Lady Pemberton." "Very well." James's voice was clipped. "I think you're making a mistake. This woman threw you over for a richer match years ago. Now she's a widow and you conveniently have the fortune she originally wanted. Don't you see the pattern?" "That's enough." Adrian's voice was hard with warning. "You don't know the circumstances. I know she hurt you." James insisted. "I was there when you received her letter. I watched it nearly destroy you. Why would you give her the chance to do that again?" "Because he loves me." Catherine spoke up, her voice steady despite her pounding heart. "And I love him. 7 years ago I made choices based on duty and fear, choices I regret, but cannot change. If Lord Blackwood is willing to give me another chance, that is between us, not you." James studied her with open skepticism. "Pretty words, Lady Pemberton. But how do I know you won't abandon him again when circumstances change?" "You don't." Catherine met his gaze directly. "You must trust your brother's judgment, and perhaps acknowledge that people can change, can grow, can learn from their mistakes." James looked between them for a long moment. Then he turned to Adrian. "I hope you know what you're doing, brother. I pray she doesn't break your heart again." He tipped his hat and walked away, leaving Catherine and Adrian standing in the village street. Adrian's hand found Catherine's, threading their fingers together. "I'm sorry, that was unpleasant. He was protecting you," Catherine said softly. "I can't blame him for that." "You really do love me," Adrian said, wonder in his voice. "After everything, you still love me." Catherine turned to face him fully. "I never stopped loving you, Adrian. Not through 7 years of a loveless marriage, not through the loneliness and regret. My heart has been yours from the moment we met. It will be yours until I die. Adrian pulled her close, mindless of the villagers who might see, and mine has been yours. He pressed his forehead to hers. Marry me, Catherine, not because of duty or obligation, not to save anyone or sacrifice anything. Marry me because you want to, because you love me as I love you. Tears streamed down Catherine's face. Yes, she whispered. Yes, yes, 1,000 times yes. Their kiss in the middle of the village street sent shockwaves through local society, but Catherine found she no longer cared about propriety or appearances. For 7 years she had lived according to others' expectations. Now, finally, she would live for herself, for love, for the man who had waited for her even when he didn't know she was waiting too. 2 months later, Catherine stood in the same church where she had once married Lord Pemberton, but this ceremony bore no resemblance to that cold, dutiful affair. The church was filled with flowers and friends and family who rejoiced in this union. Isabel served as her maid of honor, radiant with happiness for her sister. Adrian's brother James stood as best man, having grudgingly accepted their engagement after witnessing their devotion to each other. And when Adrian turned to look at Catherine as she walked down the aisle, his expression held everything she had ever wanted to see. Love, yes, but also trust, hope, and the promise of a future built on truth. Father Michael began the ceremony with traditional words, but when it came time for vows, Adrian surprised everyone by setting aside the expected language. Catherine Ashford. He said, his voice carrying through the church, 7 years ago we were separated by circumstances we could not control. Today, we stand here, not despite that separation, but strengthened by it. I vow to trust you, to communicate openly, to never let pride or fear keep us apart. I vow to build a life with you based on honesty and partnership, and I vow to love you, not just today, but every day for the rest of our lives. Catherine felt tears spilling down her cheeks as she responded with her own vows. Adrian Blackwood. Once I thought love meant sacrifice, giving up my own happiness to protect others. You've taught me that true love is not about sacrifice, but about choosing each other every day. I vow to be honest with you even when the truth is difficult. I vow to trust in us, in what we've built together, and I vow to love you with all that I am, for all the days we have ahead. When Father Michael pronounced them man and wife, the church erupted in applause. Adrian kissed Catherine with all the passion of their lost years and renewed hope. As they walked back down the aisle together, Catherine caught her mother's eye. Lady Ashford was crying, but smiling too, her expression one of relief and joy. Outside the church, well-wishers threw rice and flowers. The celebration that followed was everything their first engagement ball had not been. Joyful, genuine, filled with love instead of obligation. That evening, as the party continued, Catherine and Adrian slipped away to the terrace of Adrian's newly acquired estate. The same estate where they had first met all those years ago at her cousin's wedding. Do you remember this place? Adrian asked, pulling her close. How could I forget? Catherine smiled up at him. This is where you first asked me to dance, where I first fell in love with you. Adrian touched her face gently, reverently. I look at you now and I see everything. The girl you were, the woman you've become, the future we'll build together. I see 7 years of pain, but also the strength that pain created. I see the person I loved, and the person I'm learning to love, even more deeply. Catherine turned her face to press a kiss into his palm. You should have hated me. After what I did, you had every right to hate me, but I couldn't. Adrian said simply, even when I thought I did, even when I tried to, my heart refused. It knew something my mind didn't, that you loved me, that you had always loved me, that we were meant to find our way back to each other. Catherine buried her face against his chest, feeling his arms wrap around her. I still waited for you, she whispered, even when I had no right to hope, even when I thought you'd never forgive me. I waited. I know. Adrian's voice was thick with emotion, and I came back. Not consciously at first. I told myself I was returning to England for business opportunities, but really, I think some part of me knew that you were here, knew that we had unfinished business. They stood together as stars began to appear in the darkening sky. Two people who had lost and found each other, who had learned that love was not about perfection but about perseverance, that trust could be rebuilt, stronger for having been broken and mended, that second chances were not just possible but precious beyond measure. Years later, when Catherine Blackwood wrote in her journal about her life, she would describe two marriages. The first, to Lord Pemberton, had been 7 years of duty and sacrifice. The second, to Adrian, was a lifetime of partnership and joy. She would write about the children they had, 3 daughters and a son, all of whom grew up understanding that love required both courage and honesty. She would write about the work they did together, how they transformed the Blackwood estates into models of progressive management, how they established schools for tenant children and programs to support families in need. She would write about growing old together, about how Adrian's hair turned silver at the temples while her own chestnut locks faded to grey, about how they still walked in the gardens every evening, hand in hand, talking about everything and nothing, about how the trust they rebuilt proved stronger than the easy certainty of youth. But most of all, she would write about waiting, about how she had waited 7 years, believing she had no right to hope, about how he had waited too, not knowing he was waiting, carrying her in his heart across continents and years, about how some loves are worth waiting for, worth fighting for, worth the risk of heartbreak, because the reward is everything. On their 50th wedding anniversary, their children and grandchildren gathered to celebrate. Catherine sat beside Adrian, their hands still intertwined after all these years, and listened as her eldest daughter read from that old journal. "You should hate me," she had written, on the night she accepted his proposal. "After everything I did, after all the pain I caused, you should hate me, but you loved me instead. You chose forgiveness over bitterness. You chose us over the safety of distance. And in doing so, you taught me that love is not about deserving, but about choosing, not about perfection, but about commitment, not about the past, but about all the days ahead." Her daughter's voice wavered with emotion as she read the final lines. "I waited for you in darkness, not knowing if dawn would ever come. But it did. You came back, you found me. You loved me, despite every reason not to. And now, every morning when I wake beside you, I am grateful, not just for the years we have, but for the years we lost, because those lost years taught us what we were risking. They taught us to treasure what we nearly threw away. They taught us that some loves are worth any weight, any sacrifice, any pain, because in the end, love wins. It always wins, as long as we have the courage to let it." When the reading finished, Catherine looked up at Adrian through tears. His eyes were wet too, but he was smiling. The same smile that had captured her heart so many years ago. "Still here," he said simply, echoing the promise they made to each other every morning. "Still here," she replied. "Still waiting." He raised an eyebrow with gentle humor. "Still waiting. But I'm right here." "I know." Catherine squeezed his hand. "But I'll always be waiting for you. Waiting for your next smile, your next word, your next touch. Some things are worth waiting a lifetime for, and you, my love, are worth everything." Around them, their family applauded. Their children kissed their spouses. Their grandchildren chased each other through the garden. The evening sun cast golden light across the terrace where they sat, the same terrace where they had first kissed after 7 years apart, where they had chosen each other despite every obstacle, where they had proved that love was not defeated by time, distance, or mistake, that forgiveness was stronger than resentment, that choosing each other every day was the greatest act of courage they would ever perform.